Howdy folks, welcome to the Daily Coin. My name is Rory and today is Tuesday, June the 12th, 2018. I have the very distinct honor and great pleasure of welcoming to the show a new guest and a very forward-looking, forward-thinking person, someone who I feel a strong connection to. I've already compared him to Keith Neumeyer. He is the founder and CEO of a company called GlobaLIVE, which is involved in some very cool technologies and has an unbelievable array of projects that they're working on. And I'm speaking of Anthony Lacavera. And Anthony, welcome to the Daily Coin.
Rory, thank you for having me on.
Well, I certainly appreciate you being here. And I'm looking at your bio and the achievements list thus far, Anthony. You won CEO of the Year award, and you've been involved in over 100 ventures and founded Win, which is the fourth largest mobile provider in Canada, and sold it for $1.3 billion. All of that's very impressive. And
thank you very much, Rory. I appreciate it.
It's a good start. And you're going public with a company called GlobaLIVE, which is a 20-year-old company. And how excited are you about taking a successful 20-year-old company and bringing it to a public forum?
Well, I'm very excited, Roy, because we're talking about a new venture in the GlobaLIVE group called GlobaLIVE Technology that's going to begin trading on Wednesday the 13th under the Toronto Stock Exchange on the symbol LIVE, TSX Venture Live. And we're really excited about it because there's a convergence going on in artificial intelligence and blockchain. And we're taking advantage of that. We're going to capitalize on that and build software to capitalize on that convergence. And what do I mean by that is there's a reality in artificial intelligence today and generally going forward that the quality of the AI outputs is entirely dependent on the quality of the data input into them. And so you have this classic problem in software that's commonly known as garbage in, garbage out. I mean, if you put bad or partial data into the algorithm, you get a bad output of the algorithm. So AI is equally subject to that, as is all historically has all software been. So blockchain, enter blockchain, and you see the opportunity to take advantage of that distributed, consensus-driven data architecture that is immutable and traceable, and all of those other benefits that people commonly talk about. Blockchain, that will ensure that the quality of the data that we put into the artificial intelligence algorithms we're building is a high-quality data set, and therefore the output of the AI will be better. So that is our entire thesis, is looking at a combination of technologies, AI and blockchain. And of course, a lot of the sources of the data that we're going to load into a blockchain, if you take in the supply chain logistics example, of course, Internet of Things enters the picture. And so now you've got a series of sensors supplying data, and you, of course, want to ensure that that data is memorialized on a blockchain, is immutable, traceable, trackable, and you can rely on it for the purposes of using artificial intelligence. So that's our business plan, and we've got a number of joint ventures that we're building, and we're excited to get to market.
Like I said in the very beginning, you guys are putting together some incredible projects, and incorporating the artificial intelligence, which I have to tell you, makes me a little bit nervous just hearing that. And,
yeah.
And blockchain, which that technology is so new and it is so cool. I think that some of what it can bring to business as a whole and to our world, I think there are some unbelievable uses for that technology. I think that it's really going to change and impact our world in ways that we really don't quite grasp at this point. But I want, and you can find out more about GlobaLIVE and what Anthony's working on over at globallive.com, and the link will be in the description below. And Anthony, you have a show that's coming up on Bloomberg TV. And A, how cool and nerve-wracking is that? And B, what will the focus of the show be?
Yeah, so historically, I hosted an innovation series on Bloomberg Television that was centered around featuring the latest and greatest founders, technology business founders, and interviewed people from around the world. And we're going to continue that format. And for me personally, it's a really great education platform as I get to meet some of the best and brightest founders, CEOs around the world. And so we're excited about continuing that programming. Starting in September, actually, it's going to start airing again on Bloomberg. And the idea really is to have sort of founder-to-founder conversations where we talk about issues surrounding founding businesses generally, which of course applies in any industry, but more specifically around technologies and all the latest technologies. And there's just such as you know, Rory, just such a tidal wave of technology and disruption coming down the pike. And you mentioned your concern about artificial intelligence, and I can't tell you candidly, I share some of those concerns. And really, we've got to get ourselves, when we start talking about blockchain and cryptocurrency, and we start talking about artificial intelligence, we really have to start thinking about, as a society, the ethical considerations of some of this stuff. But probably even more near term, we got to think about the regulatory framework that this stuff is going to operate within. And we see recent examples of early days runaway AI, as it's so called. When you look at some of the recommendation engines that are machine learning driven, machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence, early artificial intelligence. Facebook is a great example where we saw runaway AI and runaway decision making using those recommendation engines that wasn't necessarily constructive for society.
Yeah, I was going to actually say Google, because then that's
Google, certainly. Same story. Amazon,
terrifying.
Same story.
It's terrifying what they are able to do with the information that we input, and then they're supposed to give it back to us the way that we presented it, but that's not always the case.
100%. So, I think this really comes down to regulators, and when we talk about blockchain and cryptocurrency, you have a lot of regulators, elected officials, policymakers. There's a lot of rhetoric out there right now talking negatively about it, but look, there's an adoption wave happening, and people are adopting increasingly the use of cryptocurrencies, and people are wanting to use them to store value and exchange value for goods. So I think that I'd like to see, as a citizen, I'd like to see governments, instead of the negative rhetoric or a lot of the rhetoric, let's get down to just creating a policy framework that's going to enable this stuff to work and integrate properly with society, and ensure that there's those consumer protections that are needed to make sure that none of this stuff gets compromised. People don't get their security compromised or their value compromised.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you saw any of the Zuckerberg, when he went up to Congress and met with them a few weeks back. He was in front of Congress for a couple of days.
I did, yeah.
It was, we need some other people looking at these technologies, because there's a serious lack of knowledge amongst the people that were asking him questions. And if those people are writing the regulations, then we're in serious trouble, because they don't know anything. And some of them they really let the cat out of the bag of their lack of knowledge. Every time that they opened their mouth, it was terrifying. It was just like, oh my goodness. And these people this is a representative of someone's community? Are you serious? It's like, wait a minute.
I concur. I think it's a significant issue. I mean, on one hand, I like to say that it's hard to fault them because the technology is evolving so quickly.
Yes.
On the other hand, I think the approach could have been having some technology experts alongside those officials that were leading that questioning. By the way, as they did in Europe, I felt like, I don't know if you caught any of Zuckerberg's testimony in Europe, but there was much more, I'll say, pervasive questions that were being asked of him, and the guy was still very well composed and got his messages out there the way he wanted to, but
Yes.
certainly the depth of the questions was a step up, I think. And yeah, I can completely concur with your perspective on it. We need our elected officials to have a better idea what's going on.
Yeah, they definitely need to go. They need to get down to the local technology resource center and brush up on some skills. And speaking of which, I mean, what impact, Anthony, will blockchain technology have on mankind, in your opinion? I mean, is this technology going to change how we conduct business overall, or what do you like most about blockchain?
I To me, Rory, blockchain brings a promise of, in the near term, call it the next 1, 2, 3 years, it brings the promise of cost. So it doesn't matter what type of business you look at. We can go across any industry, but we'll take financial services for a moment. You can envision a world where today banks are the suppliers of loans to consumers and businesses, and you can envision a world where the sources of funding of loans is democratized on a blockchain, and now any citizen can become both a lender and a borrower, and you've completely disintermediated the banks. So myself, if I want to lend someone some money or lend a business some money, I can do that on a blockchain. If I want to borrow some money, I can do that on a blockchain. And the trust relationship that a blockchain, that is the promise of blockchain, where I don't need to know the party on the other side. That trust relationship that the blockchain creates is a true efficiency in the process of lending. Where today you have to, whether you're a bank or other kind of financial institution, you have to have a great deal of knowledge of who you're lending to, and if you're a borrower, you have to supply a great deal of information to who you're borrowing from. But you can envision in a blockchain world that is decentralized with consensus-driven decision making and smart contracts that govern those loans, and a coin ecosystem that ensures that the value is inside the ecosystem. You can really envision some tremendous efficiencies where you no longer need all of that paperwork and setup associated with traditional lending. So, but it applies actually in every industry, right? And a lot of times I talk about the retail example, where you think about a large retailer and the tens of thousands of suppliers that they have as a big box retailer, all the suppliers they have that are contributing to the goods and services on their, or goods and products on their shelves. Those suppliers, they all have to have an individual relationship with each one of those suppliers that involves the supplier giving them merchandise. They get credit terms from the supplier. They pay in net 30 or net 60 terms or what have you. Down the chain, that supplier, it has their own set of suppliers and they have their own set of terms. And there's just a big flow of paperwork and risk associated with all those different credit terms. And we see retailers end up with bad debt all the time, and suppliers to retailers ending up with bad debt all the time. And I think you can envision a supply chain that's governed for a retailer that's governed by blockchain. And now suddenly you've got trust relationships, you've got traceability, trackability, you've got an immutable ledger where all the transactions are memorialized and everybody can see what everybody else is doing, where permissions are appropriate. And so that whole flow of paperwork and costs, can be greatly streamlined. So those are kind of just two, but there are many. I mean, those are two examples of near-term cost savings that are going to be realized on the blockchain. And longer term, I see great opportunities when we go back to what we talked about at the top of the conversation, the convergence of AI and blockchain. And as artificial intelligence gets more sophisticated, we can use blockchains that have good data sets, that are these data sets that are on the immutable ledger that is the blockchain. We can use those data sets to have much better outcomes with AI, and not just drive cost savings, but identify new revenue opportunities. So to use that lending example, I like to think about how we could identify, okay, if Rory is lending Anthony, $1,500 on a financial services blockchain, can there be an AI that takes all that data and says, hey, Rory, you actually can let me match you with somebody other than Anthony because you actually want to only lend $1,200 and Anthony needs $1,500. Let's make a recommendation to you about potentially a higher interest rate or a lower interest rate. But all of that can be governed by an AI that's now using a quality data set that's on that blockchain, and that can increase revenue for you as a lender, and it can reduce my costs as a borrower. So I think there's a really good opportunity there, and again, it applies across every industry. I mean, we're looking at one right now in healthcare. We're building a blockchain in partnership with a company called Acorn Labs, and we're literally putting the entire human genome onto a blockchain. So as an individual, it's very exciting. You as an individual can put your entire genome onto a private blockchain and then grant permission-based access to that information to your select healthcare practitioners. Now I'm suddenly giving you complete control of your healthcare information and control of who sees it and when and why. And so you can envision how much that can save you in terms of healthcare costs, but also how much we can save the insurance industry, and how much we can ultimately sell value-added services into that health and wellness ecosystem we're building. So really, short to medium term, lots of cost savings and efficiencies. Longer term, all kinds of new revenue opportunities as a result of the blockchain infrastructure that's going to be out there. And to really simplify it, when I talk to people say like, well, what is this thing, blockchain? Like, what really is it? What physically is it? I like to say, look, it's just quite this simple. Is that today the world runs on database technologies, whether it's Microsoft or Amazon or Oracle or SAP, some of these bigger name enterprise software game. Those databases are all centralized databases. There's one database, and starting back from those old client server days, even back to the mainframe days, everything is in one place. And all a blockchain is a database that is spread out and decentralized. And so by having a whole bunch of nodes all have the information, it becomes extremely difficult to hack because the nodes have to agree on what the data is. And if a node gets hacked, if one computer on that blockchain gets hacked and someone plays with that data, all the other nodes are saying, hey, wait a minute, that's no longer right. That's not what it is. So you would literally have to simultaneously hack some unknown number of nodes. It could be tens of thousands, hundreds of millions of nodes. And that's why a distributed, decentralized database becomes so difficult to hack and so hacker-proof generally, and why people can rely on it. And to this point, the blockchain has proven unbreakable. There's hackers all around the world as we speak, whether they're in Russia or they're in China or wherever they are, they're doing their best to break it. No one's been able to break it yet.
Yeah, as long as there's not a centralized point like a cryptocurrency exchange where information comes into a singular location. That's where the blockchain or any database becomes vulnerable. But the blockchain itself, I don't think it's been hacked. I have to rely on you as the expert to say and agree with you that it hasn't been hacked. But I do know that some of the cryptocurrency exchanges have been, and that is not the blockchain. That is a centralized singular point where they all converge.
Correct. So that is correct. That is a very important point, a very important distinction. When you yes, there have been exchange hackets and there have been thefts of coin. At scale, as you know, several $100 million of coin in a recent example. I mean, so but you're absolutely right. That is a single point of failure. That is a crypto exchange. That is not the blockchain itself.
Right, and those are two different things. And I think that people get those can get those confused. And I mean, what do you see, Anthony, as the promise of decentralization as a global revolution, or do you see this more as just being isolated to a number of niche areas? I mean, or is decentralization what we should expect over the future?
No, I think that this is going to be an evolution, Rory. There's some people who will say that this transition is going to happen in 1, 2, 3 years. There's others that are going to say it's never going to happen. I'm someone who sort of, let's look back at the evolution of the internet. In the early days of the internet in the late 90s, everybody thought it was going to change the whole world in 5 years. And, bricks and mortar businesses were dead. And, you remember all the stuff that was being said in those days. And now here we are, some 20 years later, and the world has been changed. And now we live our lives on the internet in many ways. But guess what? A lot of those bricks and mortar businesses thrive too, and they evolve their business models. And now online businesses like Amazon are starting to open their own stores because that in-person touch and personal retail experience is something that consumers value. So it's really interesting to say, okay, what did people think in 98, 99? Now we're in 2018. What's actually happened? And I tend to say, look, let's just look at what history is going to repeat itself. Let's just look at what happened. It's going to take 15, 20 years for blockchain to be truly ubiquitous, pervasive in our society and cover and touch every corner of the economy. But in the meantime, there's going to be a transition. And so what I'm trying to look for are where are those areas in the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years where there's going to be disruption, where there's going to be displacement of legacy technology in favor of artificial intelligence and blockchain-driven technology. That's the entire focus of GlobaLIVE technology. Where can we find those spots? We think it's in financial services. We think it's in healthcare. We think it's in agriculture. Excuse me, and a few others, manufacturing. But some industries just don't lend themselves to it that much. So those will be longer term. In the same way we had banking disrupted pretty early in the internet era, I think banking and financial services is going to be disrupted again early in the blockchain cycle. But it's not going to happen overnight. And people say, oh, well, banks are going to, the lending system, the banking system is going to be completely displaced in favor of, no banks, and or the banking system is going to completely change. And I mean, I just don't believe those things are going to happen. You look at a brand like JP Morgan Chase. I mean, that's a very well-established, trusted brand. They're not going to just be displaced by a fintech starting up with blockchain. You know what I mean?
Well, I wish it could, but
sometimes we all do, don't we?
oh, we can dream.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to disrupt.
I got you though. You were absolutely right. We all have had our negative experiences with the big banks, but I don't know, man. I don't know how you displace that brand equity. I mean, those trust relationships have been around for 100 years.
I think they're I think they're concerned. And when I read articles, where Christine Lagarde, the managing director of the IMF, where she is demanding that the central banks around the world roll out some type of cryptocurrency that's in place by 2021, that's her giving them their marching orders, and don't get left behind because this is evolving, this is happening, and you better get with the program. And
question about it.
You can't, that can't be denied.
No question about it. It's a significant evolution that's going to happen, and disruption, and that's going to happen. And I just think I'm in the camp that's that's going to be a transition. It's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to be a long-term evolution.
Yes, and I agree with that. I don't think that any of our financial or economic systems can take any more shocks. Anything even resembling 2008. I don't think they're stable enough to be able to handle even a positive, even something that would be positive, punch in the gut to the system. I don't think that they could take it. I really don't. But I really want to get into AI, and because I know that because this is something that I just don't know. It's one of the programs that GlobaLIVE is involved in is Next AI. And Anthony,
yes.
What is Next AI, and can you give us an overview of what artificial intelligence is? I mean, I think that there's a lot of people, including myself, who have may have, a misconception of what AI is, or some people understand it fully, but I think that most people just have, a Terminator
Yeah.
movie type of AI understanding. And if you
Yeah.
could kind of clear the air, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, certainly, Rory. Well, yeah, from our perspective, my perspective on artificial intelligence and where it's headed, uh, I'm not at all a believer that we're headed for Armageddon, and the Terminator scenario. I believe that we are going to be ending up in a place that is positive for humanity, and that there's going to be broad benefits to society by having artificial intelligence do many of the functions that are not really productive time that humans spend today, and humans can spend time doing more productive activities. I believe in that. I don't want to call it utopia, because there's going to be, like anything else, there's going to be a painful transition in the workforce, and there will be job losses, and there will be pain in that transition. But at the other side of it, I believe there's a better place. So I'm an optimist. Let me just start the conversation there. But I am a concerned optimist, and the reason I'm concerned is because we don't have really an ethical or regulatory framework within which these technologies are being rolled out. And we've already talked in this conversation about the Amazon and Google and Facebook examples of where these centralized platforms that are AI enabled in some fashion already, where they can go wrong, and where we've seen them go wrong from a security perspective, data propagation perspective, etc. But in a simple just description, artificial intelligence today, as it's operating today and where it's being used today, is all about, very simply, lowering the cost of prediction. Lowering the cost of a prediction of an outcome is what AI is all about. So, and the way that works is, an AI algorithm looks at a whole history of information. If we use the financial services example, it would be the history of loans that a bank gave to consumers and businesses in their territory. So, the millions of consumers and tens of thousands of businesses that a regional bank, take as an example, gave to consumers over the last 50 years, all that loan data. There's a whole bunch of data in there that's about default rates, bad debt rates, delinquencies, early repayments, accelerated repayments, etc. An AI today, in this example, helping a bank, would take in all of that historical data and say, okay, we've got a new customer and Anthony wants a loan. And it will go back and look at the entire history of loans and match loan profiles of people that are similar to me, and then say, okay, here's what we think Anthony can borrow. Here's what we think Anthony can sustain in terms of credit. Here's what the cautions are, and here's where we should check in with Anthony in 6 months or in 9 months for these reasons, etc. So it makes a prediction, and it lowers the cost of the prediction, because instead of having, in today's world, a physical person or several people underwriting that loan or underwriting that mortgage, now suddenly a machine can say, you know what, Anthony's good for a mortgage for, whatever the number is, $250,000. He's good for that mortgage. And here's going to likely be his repayment schedule. Here's the reasons why he may have an issue and why you should check in with him at these points. It's predicting the outcome based on looking at similar profiles to me for the past 50 years. And it looks at them, Rory, fast, and adjudicates that loan, fast. There's no way a human could digest, 100,000 loan records that look like mine over the last 50 years in the span of a minute, and then predict an outcome for a future loan. That's what AI does today. It predicts the future using the past, and it predicts the future at a lower cost than a business can predict it today, using the historical data quickly. That's what AI is doing today.
So
There's all kind.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I really like the simplicity of it's artificial intelligence is about making a prediction. That's
Yes.
what it is,
That's what it
is. That's the when you burn everything away, that's what you're left with, and that's I love that, because that is as simple as it gets.
Yeah.
And just like
Yeah.
you said, it's taking all this historical data. Doesn't matter what the historical data is. I mean, it could be anything, growing grass or, breaking rocks or
You got it.
loans. It doesn't matter. It's just the historical data that goes in that says that this is how or this is what should happen with the next step or
You
the
got
next
it.
time that this happens.
You got it. That's exactly the way I like to think about it. And now there's the next wave of AI that we'll talk about in a minute. But I'll just give you one more example to really sort of put a fine point on it. And if you think about, pick a sport like fishing. Take fishing for example. Today, if you love fishing and you're a good fisher, you're good at fishing, you're gonna have a feel for where the fish are going to be and when, and you're going to get that feel because you've had 10, 20 years, whatever, of fishing a certain lake or stream or whatever, and you've got a good feel for when to go, where to go, why to go, how to go. Um, uh, in some respects, a prediction machine that is an AI for that would be kind of detrimental because you take all the fun out of that sport if the machine says, okay, here's the weather today, here's the day, time of year, here's the weather patterns coming this afternoon, here's some other inputs on, what kind of the pace of that stream today, the level of the stream. Okay, like drop your line in the water right here, and so because that's where the fish is going to be. That's
at 2:43 p.m.
Yeah, exactly. Drop your line 3 feet in that stream at 2:43 in this spot.
Woo, we're having some fun now. Oh my goodness. That's a great analogy. And
Yeah.
tell us about Next AI, because this is a project that GlobaLIVE, which is your company that you're involved in, and GlobaLIVE is you are an entrepreneur of sorts. I mean, you make things like you make Next AI possible through GlobaLIVE. And we're going to get into GlobaLIVE in just a second, but really am interested in this project, this Next AI, what you guys have going on with that.
Yeah. So Next AI is not something that I founded. It's an incubator. It's an artificial intelligence incubator and accelerator, and it's a very interesting program where we combine academic courses with the founding and building of businesses and incubating businesses. And so it has emerged as a leading artificial intelligence incubator, and there are participants in the program that are starting businesses that come from all over the world. The current cohort, there's people from some 21 different countries that are all experts in AI. So they all typically have done postdoctoral research in various branches of AI, and tons of research and publications are all published around it. And they come together and form businesses in combination with an academic program that we have, that's being provided by leading lecturers from all the many of the big name schools across the United States and Canada. And that program has been very successful because I think we have a unique format of curating these founders and helping them get their act together from the perspective of starting a business, and then we have brought in corporate partners that come with real business problems that they're trying to solve. And so Magna, for example, is one of the founding sponsors of Next AI. Magna is a leading automotive parts manufacturer. They're one of the largest automotive parts manufacturers in the world. They supply all the majors with all sorts of different parts, automotive parts, globally. And they have a lot of issues with recall of parts. So they get a part into a Ford or a GM or a Chrysler vehicle, and suddenly there's a problem and a recall happens, and then of course Ford is looking back at them like it was your part that was a problem. So they have a really significant motivation to use AI and blockchain to ultimately blockchain, but AI in the short term to try to predict, again, going back to the cost of prediction and lowering the cost of prediction. They want to predict a fault in a part. So they want to watch the assembly line and say, okay, there was this, quarter inch variance on this part of the line, and then there was a third inch variance here. By the time that adds up, okay, we're in the fourth or fifth or sixth robotic installation in the line. The part is defective, and so we should never send it out to go into a vehicle because it's a defective part. And so we want to be able to predict that outcome. And so that's an example of like a real life business problem that, if it results in a recall, is tens or hundreds of millions of dollars cost to the automotive manufacturer, and and then all the blowback into Magna as a supplier too. You can see how much cost can be saved, and then there's also all the public safety considerations as well. Like let's not let that defective part get into a vehicle and risk people's lives.
Right.
There's an example where AI can just truly, straightforwardly be beneficial to society.
And I like that a lot. I mean, that would be something that I hadn't even thought of, and I'm sure most people haven't, as far as looking at something as simple, not simple, but something as mundane as auto parts, and the use of artificial intelligence to be able to predict what's going to happen and how it's going to happen, and to defer, or not defer, but to make better or make the appropriate change to eliminate the problem that you saw 100,000 units ago.
You got it.
It's really incredible. And how early or how late are we in the development of artificial intelligence?
It's the beginning. I mean, it really is the beginning. I mean, we've got this wave now of lowering the cost of prediction, and then the second wave that's coming is going to be built on a concept and now technology platform that's being called deep learning or neural networks. And these are deep learning and neural networks are a concept that is now starting to be commercialized in very early, very, very early days. I mean, it's very early days for the first wave of AI. So let me just be clear: we're 5+ years, away from seeing some of the stuff we just talked about in terms of lowering the cost of prediction, for that to be in the marketplace. 5 years and beyond, we're into talking about deep learning, and what that is really is now. And the next step of AI is, and this is where now a lot of the folks like Elon Musk or Stephen Hawking, folks that are really concerned and vocally very concerned about where AI can go, is now you're talking about not just lowering the cost of prediction, but you're talking about a machine that says, what other information do I need to achieve whatever outcome I want? And I'm going to go and get that. So it starts to reason on its own and figure out what other new information it needs to be able to solve, and what other items it needs, potentially, products it needs, whatever, to solve whatever problem it's being tasked with. And the concern there is that you get into this concept that people are talking about these days called artificial general intelligence, and that artificial general intelligence is kind of an umbrella term that's being used for this whole wave of deep learning that's coming, where now suddenly it's not a machine that's set up to, in the example we just talked about with auto parts, to take the data in from a manufacturing line and all the robotics along a line and all the humans along a line, take in all the data, assess the variances each station, and say, okay, this is a defective part, don't let it go out of the plant. That it goes away from just being a machine that does that to now into a machine that makes a lot more decisions on its own about what problems it's going to solve. Many people believe, including some of those big names like Elon Musk, believe that could lead to very significant problems for society. Runaway
Yes.
AI.
Yes.
And I share those concerns.
Yes.
My only thing is that we've got not a lot of years, but we've got several years here where regulators and policymakers have just got to get their act together and
Yes.
get a framework in place that governs this stuff. I mean, it's just that simple. Just like any other technology. I mean, it's not like we let cars get out on the roads without rules, right?
True.
It's not, it's not like we let the internet operate without rules. It's not like we we have in the automotive context, we have roads that have rules, we have policing of the roads, we have traffic signs, and so you have to have that kind of framework of rules for these things to operate within, or you do run that risk of things getting out of hand.
Yes, and if they get out of hand, then we could have some very serious problems.
I
But
completely agree.
GlobaLIVE, we've mentioned that a few times. This is your company. This is your baby. This is what you've been involved in for the past 20 years. And you've been working with Leor Gans and those guys over at Wealth Research Group. And they've put together a fantastic fact sheet on GlobaLIVE. And you can find it at wealthresearchgroup.com/live. And if you would, Anthony, just what exactly does GlobaLIVE? What do you guys do?
So GlobaLIVE is a GlobaLIVE technology, which is going to be listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange next week. TSXV Live is the ticker. It is a software company that's building AI and blockchain software stacks and commercializing them into a number of industries: financial services, manufacturing, healthcare, and agriculture, and media are the first five that we're focused on. And we're developing AI-enabled and blockchain-enabled technology solutions for those industries. There'll be disruption elements of what we're doing, but also just helping our joint venture partners and who are ultimately also our customers, helping them solve real business problems today and making their business more efficient, like I've been describing, with respect to the benefits of AI and blockchain, and then longer term, identifying new revenue opportunities using AI and blockchain.
Now, is this going to help GlobaLIVE to be to position the shareholders better to maximize returns?
Yeah, look, I'm a very long-term focused founder, CEO. I've been at it, as you mentioned, for 20 years. This latest venture, GlobaLIVE Technology, is my latest focus. But in the GlobaLIVE group, over the last 20 years, I've had 5 exits of businesses I've started. The last one you mentioned on this conversation, I sold for $1.3 billion. That business again was a long-term build, and this will be a very long-term build for me. I haven't raised a huge amount of capital for it, and I don't need to raise a huge amount of capital for it. We're building software. We've got great relationships from my long history of showing the enterprise customer in various markets really good technology and solutions. So we've got a track record that we're leaning on, that is really my organization's track record to help get us into relationships that would be very, very difficult for an early stage startup to normally get into. And so I think we're feeling quite positive about the early momentum we've been able to develop. And I just stress to people all the time when they ask me about the business and what I'm seeing and what I'm planning on doing and how are we talking about creating value. It's all about thinking very long term about where these technologies are going to go. And this is not a short-term, cryptocurrency play by any means. This is blockchain infrastructure, AI infrastructure. It's software that will have a role to play in the industries we're working in, hopefully for decades to come.
Yeah, and you mentioned your long history. You don't have Bloomberg TV approach you and say, we would like for you to do a program because you're some kind of fly-by-night or you're not rock solid in what you are trying to accomplish and seeing more of a bigger picture, long-term project. They're not just going to do that, because
that's true of them.
Because you're rolling out the latest cryptocurrency.
You got it. I mean, they don't think short term. They're certainly, and they've got one of the leading brands in the world. I mean, Civic Connect, Eigen Innovations, Vital News. I mean, these are all organizations that are led by industry leaders. Vital News is, I'm building a a blockchain to memorialize fact and truth in the media industry. And my partner there in that joint venture is Gregory D'Alba. He was the president and COO of CNN for upwards of 20 years back in the days from '86 to '06 when CNN was a real actual news outlet. And
Thank you.
And before it became I don't even know what to call it today, but in the late 1980s, and the early 1990s, it was a very credible news organization, and so it's sort of a back to the future there with leveraging blockchain to really address some of the challenges in the media industry with respect to the propagation of fake news. So I mean that's a big project I'm taking on. That's a long-term project. This is not something that's going to create anything that's going to be other than long-term, hopefully positive transformation to an industry that is in desperate need of it.
Yes, it absolutely, because the mainstream media has shot themselves in the foot over the past decade and a half in particular. I mean, they've just really done a number on themselves, and it's we could just be on that topic for another hour.
Yeah, that's our next conversation, Rory.
But this has been really great, Anthony, and I'm really grateful for all your time today. And you're the CEO, you're the founder and CEO of GlobaLIVE and GlobaLIVE Technologies, and you can find out all about what these guys have going on over at globallive.com. And like I said just a moment ago, wealthresearchgroup.com/live is a great fact sheet that's been put together to introduce you to the stock under the symbol LIVE, live. And Anthony, is there anything you want to leave the audience with?
Well, I'm on Twitter as at Anthony Lacavera. I'm on LinkedIn, Anthony Lacavera, and I'm on those social channels. Not to talk about anything in my life really, other than what I'm doing with AI and blockchain. So if anyone's interested in, anytime I find a latest kind of tidbit of knowledge or information or anything I see in the marketplace that's interesting and unique, I mean, I share it. And so, if anyone is interested, I'd be happy to engage in a conversation with you on those channels.
That sounds great, because I'm sure that there's going to be some questions coming from the audience, and because this has been a great conversation. And Anthony, I look forward to speaking with you in the not too distant future, and I wish you nothing but success.
Rory, I really appreciate all the time. Have a great day.
You too.